it's easy to dismiss them as quaint. These ancient customs that seem bizarre to our modern sensibilities. Who does unsmile indulgently at the thought of our ancestors hanging up shrunken heads as a home decor trend? Well, maybe we should reserve our amusement for those who claim the skulls of the dead can grant wishes. This macabre idea might seem like a ludicrous footnote in some exotic tale of ritualistic headhunting, except for one small detail. These shrunken skulls weren't just trophies, they were talismans, imbued with power because of their shape. You see, the shrunken skull is a motif that stretches across the globe, appearing in cultures separated by oceans and millennia. From the remote highlands of Papua New Guinea to the sun-baked villages of the Hopi, the Dogon, and the Maya, there's a striking consistency in what these skulls represent. They all symbolize death, yes, but also transformation. And nowhere is this more evident than in the Maya villages of northern Guatemala. Here, in the shadow of the ancient Maya cities, a unique tradition has survived for centuries. Each year during Holy Week, the men of the village take part in a ritual procession. They dress as hairy wild men, dancing and singing as they carry out an ancient ritual, the Danza de los Monstruos, or Dance of the Monsters. They're not just putting on a show. They're enacting a battle between good and evil, between the living and the dead. And at the heart of this dance is a shrunken skull. In fact, when you look closely at the shrunken skull motif, you start to notice patterns, shapes that echo across continents. Take the shape of the human head, for instance, a common motif in Native American cultures, or the feline visage, which speaks of cunning and the afterlife, often associated with witches and shamanism. Even the shriveled apple motif, found in everything from ancient Rome to the Philippines, has links to death and decay. So what's behind this global fascination with shrunken skulls? What could these shrunken skulls possibly represent? One theory draws parallels between the shrunken skull and another potent symbol, the mandala. Both represent cycles, the shrunken skull symbolizing the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Just as the mandala has its roots in ancient India, so too do theories about the origins of the shriveled skull motif. Some believe it came from ancient Egypt, where mummification practices may have led to a preoccupation with preserving and even shrinking the human skull. Others point to the ancient Greeks, whose myths and rituals surrounding death and the afterlife may have inspired similar beliefs. Perhaps the shriveled skull is a universal symbol born from humanity's shared fascination with mortality. Maybe it's a memento mori, a reminder of our own fleeting existence. Or maybe it's something more, a connection to the unseen world, a tangible link to the spirits that walk among us. What if these shriveled skulls aren't just symbols of death, but actual vessels for the souls of the departed? Think about it. Shrunken heads become vessels. The very act of shrinking the skull could be seen as an attempt to contain the essence of a person, to hold their soul within a physical form. It's like trying to trap smoke in a bottle, an impossible task that nevertheless speaks to the desperation of the human condition. Now, I don't know about you, but that's a pretty terrifying thought. The idea that somewhere out there, people are keeping the souls of their ancestors trapped in shrunken skulls, forever bound to their earthly vessels. If that's true, then we're not just dealing with a symbol here. We're talking about a very real potential danger. Those who practice this dark art are essentially playing with fire, risking the wrath of the very spirits they're trying to control. After all, who knows what a restless soul is capable of? Suddenly, the stories of the shrunken skull take on a whole new meaning. They're not just tales of superstition or folklore. They're warnings, cautionary tales of what happens when you mess with the forces beyond our understanding. Let this be a lesson to us all. Some things are better left undisturbed, some relics better left untouched, for who knows what dark secrets they hold, what ancient powers they might unleash. Remember, the world is a dangerous place, full of things that lurk in the shadows, waiting for their chance to strike. All it takes is a moment of weakness, a single misstep, and you might just unleash something you can't control. The settlement lay buried in memory, its name dissolved into the soil, but the old cartographer's notes marked its position with a faded cross. The journey there was not on any modern road, but only goat paths that wound between black cliffs and forests where the air seemed older, heavier. Each turn in the path felt as if it were pulling me backward in time, toward a place where the rules of the living were uncertain. When I reached the valley, there were no standing houses, only the suggestion of their shapes, foundations choked with roots. Fragments of walls that once kept in warmth and kept out the dark, but scattered among them, astonishingly intact, were the doorposts, and upon some, still hanging were the pale crowns. They had aged into shades of ivory and parchment, etched with delicate fissures like the veins of winter leaves. No birds nested there, not even the wind dared to sing through them. In a cracked ledger left in what might have been the chieftain's dwelling, I found the first written explanation. The script was tight and angular, as if scratched in haste. We hang the crown at the threshold, for the threshold is a mouth. It must be fed, or it will speak to the wrong ones. No name, no date. Only that single entry, as if whoever wrote it did not wish to leave more. Through comparison with merchant records from neighboring provinces, I pieced together fragments. This village had been known for its stubborn isolation, refusing to trade except in the coldest months, and even then only by leaving goods at the forest's edge. Outsiders said the inhabitants were courteous but distant, their eyes carrying the stillness of deep water. Some claimed that every household was bound by a pact with the hill itself, that the earth beneath their feet remembered more than it should. As the light failed, I descended into the valley bottom, following a barely perceptible track. It led to a circle of stones, 5 upright slabs and 1 fallen, set in a ring like a fist clutching an empty eye socket. 5 of the crowns from the houses were here, and in their midst, a 6th, larger than the rest, made from a single branch of driftwood, smoothed and whitened by the river. Each was different, yet undeniably linked, and each seemed to be watching something. I knew instinctively that whatever had happened here had to do with these objects, but my reason told me I was dealing with the relics of a vanished culture, and cultures do not speak to those who find them. So I sat down among the stones, resting my back against one of the uprights, and I waited. And then the silence began to shift. At first it was only a pressure in my ears, like the prelude to a long-forgotten lullaby. Then the wind took up a low, steady tone, and the crowns began to sway. Not violently, but with a deliberate cadence that matched the rhythm of my pulse. And from that harmony, shapes began to emerge, faces and figures, all formed from the swirling gray of twilight. They came from the forest behind me, from the hills above, from the very stones I leaned against, rising like ghosts to take their places around the circle. Their eyes, dark pools in the gathering gloom, were fixed on the empty doorway in the center, and from its stillness they drew power. From this vantage, it was clear that they weren't watching the arrival of any outsider, but the absence of something essential. Whatever had passed through that gateway in days gone by was not returning. And in their despair, the silent figures wove themselves into the fabric of the hill, becoming one with the moss and lichen, the creeping vines and the grasping roots. They would wait here forever, or until the day when someone came to replace them. As suddenly as they had appeared, the vision was gone, the wind dropped, the crowns still, and I was left in the fading light of a cold winter afternoon with the last of the sun. The figures melted back into the landscape, leaving me alone with the echoes of their sorrow. I got to my feet and brushed dirt from my clothes, careful not to disturb the stones. As I retraced my steps, the forest seemed less dense, the path ahead clearer. I walked without knowing how long, until the crowns disappeared from sight and the memory of the village lifted like mist, and then the trees gave way to the familiar jumble of the hillside, and I stepped out onto the open road. It took months before I found the first tangible trace of the keeper. In a merchant's chronicle from 2 centuries past, between lists of traded salt and hides, there was a short, almost reluctant note: "Met the one who watches the doorways. Eyes like the hollows they guard." Spoke as if every sentence was a lock. Following this lead drew me into regions where maps turned vague and roads were no more than whispers in the soil. In a storm-beaten fishing hamlet on the northern coast, an elder recognized the title. She would not speak of it indoors, so we sat outside in the salt-laden wind as the tide gnawed at the rocks. "The keeper," she said, "is not born. The keeper is chosen, and once chosen, they belong to neither the living nor the gone." Her words were heavy. She told me that every village with such crowns had, in its memory, someone who bore the burden of the threshold. The keeper's task was simple in telling but endless in doing, to ensure that what waited beyond did not mistake the way in. They carried no weapons, only knowledge, and the understanding that a doorway is not just a gap in a wall, but a seam between 2 fabrics that should never fully merge. Her gaze drifted toward the cliffs, and I followed to a dark cleft where the sea vanished into stone. "The last keeper I saw," she said, "was there, waiting, listening. When I asked if they still lived, she only shook her head. Alive, perhaps, but that word means less to them than to you." That night I dreamt of a corridor without walls, where doorframes floated in the dark. Each bore a crown, and behind each crown was a form, changing, shifting, as though being rewritten. In the center stood a figure robed in weathered cloth, holding a cord of braided fiber. They looked at me without speaking, yet I felt the question: "Which side of the door are you on?" When I awoke, the sound of the sea outside seemed to echo the sigh I had first heard in the highlands. I understood then that finding the keeper was not about locating a person in space, but stepping into a place where the rules that separate the known from the unknown no longer held sway. It was a truth I would learn more fully when I stood at the precipice of the world. The mountain pass had been my only route into the domain of the Unseelie Court, and now the only path down was a treacherous scramble over shale and ice. A biting wind tore across the exposed spine of the world. Hungry to snuff out any hope of warmth, I pulled tighter at the hood of my cloak, shielding my face as much for the sake of my pride as my skin. Below me, the land fell away to swirling mists and the endless murmur of the abyss. My fingers tightened on the staff that was both my support and my weapon. The air grew colder, the light dimmer, as though the sky itself was recoiling from the place I neared. Then I saw it, a silhouette outlined against the fading light, a solitary figure standing in the entrance to the pass. Their posture was that of a supplicant, their form crowned with a circlet of twisted thorns. They were small in stature, dwarfed by the grandeur of the threshold they guarded. Yet there was something about their stance, the tilt of their head, the way the wind seemed to gather around them almost in deference, that spoke of a power older than these mountains, deeper than the chasms that yawned below. As I descended, the silence pressed in, broken only by the keening of the wind. I called out, my voice echoing oddly in the stillness. The crowned figures stirred, turning to face me, and I saw that they were not alone. Behind them, pressing close to the rock face, were others. Some were humanoid in shape, yet all were wreathed in shadows, their forms shifting like smoke. All eyes turned to me, unblinking, unwavering. I stopped, unsure whether to advance or flee, when one of the shadowy figures stepped forward. It glided closer, taking a shape that made my blood run cold. Tall and gaunt, it was wreathed in tattered rags, its face hidden in a cowl. Its outstretched hand was skeletal, its nails like talons. With a raspy voice that scraped against my bones, it beckoned and it gestured behind it, back into the mountain. Understanding dawned. This was the test. To pass the threshold, I must enter the mountain's heart. If I refused, whatever waited within would find a way to reach me anyway. If I agreed, I would face whatever trials the mountain had in store. As the shadowed figure motioned again, I realized it wasn't just an invitation, it was a warning. I was about to step into a place where choices had consequences, where the rules of the world I knew no longer applied. For a moment I hesitated, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon me, sensing the presence of something vast and unknowable stirring in the depths of the mountain. Then, taking a steadying breath, I tightened my grip on my staff and stepped forward, leaving the safety of the sunlit pass to plunge into the chilling embrace of the unknown. And when I turned back, the mist had come for me too. It's a strange thing to find, a ruin that sits on a ridge like a broken tooth, visible for miles around. But when you go to it, there's no track to be found, only when you least expect it. Perhaps when your hope has almost gone, does a gully open up or a thicket part, and you find yourself climbing upward toward that lonely place. And even then, it seems to pull you back. This ruin on the hill, I remember the first time I saw it. I was barely more than a child, small for my years and full of questions. I trailed after my father who, with a shake of his head and a sigh, shouldered his way through the brambles that choked the path, but I turned back. When he called out to me, the mist had come for me too. We found it standing on a ridge of dark stone, silent and stark against the bruised sky. There was no path to it, no way to reach it except by climbing through gullies and thickets that seemed to pull me back with each step. Then at last, when I thought I could go no further, I stumbled out onto a plateau. The air here was unnervingly still, as though the very wind had been holding its breath, and there before me sat the ruin. Its walls were stripped bare, the roof long gone, the sky yawning where it should have been. Yet every doorway remained, each crowned with a pale limestone arch that looked like a skull. Some of these were small and fine, others broad and heavy, etched with markings that might have been symbols or the scars of time. I walked slowly, tracing the grooves in the stone with my fingers, feeling a pull toward the largest of these doorways. And as I passed beneath it, the air shifted, as if the ruin itself had drawn a breath. There was no sound, not a bird call or the rustle of leaves, only the distant drumming of a woodpecker and the faintest suggestion of running water. Inside, the silence pressed against my skin. There was no furniture, no remnants of daily life, only the darkness within the doorway and the promise of more. I hesitated, then stepped inside. Each archway framed a sliver of the gray sky, and I followed them in turn, counting the doorways one after another, until I had passed through 7 in all. The walls suggested there should have been only 3, but something had been added here, some perversion of the original design. Each time I stepped through, I felt the faintest resistance, like the skin of water parting, and the air grew colder, damper at the end. A single archway yawned before me, and beyond it, I could feel a change in the temperature, a subtle shift in the very essence of the place. Gathering my courage, I walked toward it, my footfall echoing in the oppressive quiet. In the center, there was a stone table inlaid with a spiral of dark minerals that glistened faintly in the gloom. Upon it rested a cord of braided fiber. I reached out, my fingers brushing against its rough surface, and the air trembled. From somewhere beyond the walls, a low sigh moved through the crowns, one by one, as though they were answering a call. Then I noticed that each crown faced inward, toward the heart of the ruin. This was not a warning to the outside world, a sign to ward off trespassers or intruders. It was a watch, a silent sentinel set to guard whatever lay within. As the realization struck me, a tremor ran through the air, and the shadows deepened with the setting sun. My blood ran cold. I stumbled back, my eyes darting from doorway to doorway. I had counted 7, but there were at least a dozen more, and they were not right. Some were too high, their crowns askew. Others were too wide, their lintels sagging under unseen weights. On the path down, I passed the remains of another doorway half buried in the soil, its crown broken, and I knew with a sickening certainty that I had disturbed something ancient and best left undisturbed, for what had once passed through that broken arch would now have the chance to cross again. I left the ridge before dusk, though the light seemed reluctant to follow. Even from the forest below, I could still see the ruin outlined against the fading sky, its crowns catching the last glow like moons in eclipse. I had come seeking answers, but all I carried away were fragments. Fragments that formed a shape I dared not name. Back in the city, the noise of markets and the warmth of lamplight should have pulled me free. But each time I passed through a doorway, I found myself glancing up, half expecting to see an emblem swaying above me. I began to notice other thresholds. Old shops with carved lintels, homes with weathered charms nailed above the frame. Each time I stopped to study one, the wind would shift, carrying the scent of wood smoke and something else. Something indescribable that made my skin prickle and my heart pound. As if I was trespassing on a memory not my own. Were these two crowns in disguise? Their language forgotten, but still they spoke to me. Still they sang of things just beyond my sight. The crowns in the village, the keeper, the ruin. They were echoes of something older than any settlement, older than the people who lived here or the tales they told. They hinted at a time when the veil between the inside and the outside, the seen and the unseen, was more delicate, more easily breached. I remembered the pact made on that wind-battered ridge, a bargain struck to keep the world safe by banishing what should not be, what must not be named. But as I walked, it occurred to me that such pacts were never one-sided. The other party still remembers, I realized, and so the question is, what do they want? The thought struck me like a physical blow, knocking the breath from my lungs and sending me stumbling. I reached out to steady myself against a nearby tree, my fingers digging into the rough bark. I closed my eyes, trying to quell the rising panic, trying to make sense of it. What did they want? We had given them our word, yes, but what had they given us in return? Was this the payment? Was I meant to stumble upon these fragments of the past, these echoes of a forgotten age? Or was this just the beginning? As I stood there, the line between the worlds grew thin as gossamer. I could feel their presence all around me, just beyond my sight, waiting. I knew then that the keeper was right. Some things are not meant to be unearthed. Some doorways are best left unopened. But curiosity, once awakened, is a persistent thing. And I had opened that door. I had let the wind of change stir the embers of the past, so now I must follow, must seek understanding. The path forward was clear. I needed to find the source of these echoes, the heart of the forgotten magic that still thrummed beneath the surface of the world. I had walked among the ruins, explored the forgotten corners of the forest, delved into the deepest recesses of the earth. I had sought the wisdom of ancient oaks and the solace of kindred spirits. And slowly, painstakingly, I began to piece together the truth. We had sought to banish what must not be named, yes, but in doing so we had forgotten the balance. For every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. We had severed the connection, broken the flow, and in doing so had disrupted the natural order. But the pact was not meant to be a prison, not meant to be a barrier. It was meant to be a bridge, a way to honor the ebb and flow of existence. We had forgotten the language, the customs, the very essence of what it meant to be human. We had forgotten that we are not separate from the world, but a part of it. And so I came to understand that the payment was not a punishment, but a gift, a reminder, a call to return to what had been forgotten. The crowns were not just guardians, they were signatures on an agreement, an acknowledgement of the sacredness of life, of the interconnectedness of all things. They were a reminder that we are not alone, that there are forces beyond our understanding that watch over us, that guide us, that protect us. And perhaps, just perhaps, if we listen closely enough, we can hear their song. We can feel their presence beside us, and when we pass through the arch of our own home, we will remember that we are not just entering a building, but stepping through a threshold into the mystery of existence itself. If you've followed me this far, subscribe, so the next time we step through, we won't have to wonder which side we're on.